Look for the answers to these questions in this reading. Number 1. Explain why the girls were afraid of the soldiers. Number 2. Why isn't Kirsty afraid of the soldiers? Number 3. What advice did Mrs. Rosen give the girls about behaving outside? And number 4. Why do you think the Free Danes newspaper was important in Denmark during the war years? Try and find these questions while we are going through the chapter, and then we'll answer them at the end of the chapter. Chapter 1b. As they turned to enter the building, both girls looked straight ahead, toward the door. They did it purposely, so they would not catch the eyes or the attention of 2 more soldiers who stood with their guns on this corner as well. Kirsty scurried ahead of them through the door, chattering about the picture she was bringing home from kindergarten to show Mama. For Kirsty, the soldiers were simply part of the landscape, something that had always been there on every corner, as unimportant as a lamppost, throughout her remembered life. Kirsty responds differently because she's too young to understand why the girls are scared, why the German soldiers shouldn't be there, and what is actually so frightening about them being there. Are you going to tell your mother? Ellen asked Anna-Marie as they trudged together up the stairs. I am not. My mother would be upset. No, I won't either. Mama would probably scold me for running on the street. She said goodbye to Ellen on the 2nd floor where Ellen lived and continued on to the 3rd, practicing in her mind a cheerful greeting for her mother, a smile, a description of today's spelling test in which she had done well. But she was too late. Kirsty had gotten there first. And he poked Anna-Marie's big bag with his gun, and then he grabbed my hair. Kirsty was chattering as she took off her sweater in the center of the apartment living room. But I wasn't scared. Anna-Marie was, and Ellen too, but not me. Miss Jansen rose quickly from the chair by the window where she'd been sitting. Mrs. Rosen, Ellen's mother, was there too, in the opposite chair. They'd been having coffee together, as they did many afternoons. Of course, it wasn't really coffee, though the mother still called it that, having coffee. There had been no real coffee in Copenhagen since the beginning of the Nazi occupation, not even any real tea. The mother sipped at the hot water flavored with herbs. So during the Nazi occupation, farmers became soldiers and the factories were producing weapons instead of coffee and tea and sometimes even food. Anna-Marie, what happened? What is Kirsty talking about? Her mother asked anxiously. Where's Ellen? Mrs. Rosen had a frightened look. Ellen's in your apartment. She didn't realize you were here. Anna-Marie explained. Don't worry, it isn't anything. It was the two soldiers who stand on the corner of Ostenbrogade. You've seen them. You know the tall one with the long neck, the one that looks like a silly giraffe. She told her mother and Miss Rosen of the incident, trying to make it sound humorous and unimportant. But their uneasy looks didn't change. I slapped his hand and I shouted at him, Kirsty announced importantly. No, she didn't, Mama, Anna-Marie reassured her mother. She's exaggerating, as always. Mrs. Johansson moved to the window and looked down to the street below. The Copenhagen neighborhood was quiet. It looked the same as always, people coming and going from the shops, children at play, the soldiers on the corner. She spoke in a low voice to Ellen's mother. They must be edgy because of the last resistance incident. Did you read the Frida Danske about the bombings in Hillerød and Nørrebro? Although she pretended to be absorbed in unpacking her school books, Anna-Marie listened, and she knew what her mother was referring to. Die Vrije Danske, the Free Danes, was an illegal newspaper. Why would this magazine be so important to the Danish people? Peter Nielsen brought it to them occasionally, carefully folded and hidden among ordinary books and papers, and Mama always burnt it after she and Papa had read it. But Anna-Marie heard Mama and Papa talk, sometimes at night, about the news they received that way, news of sabotage against the Nazis, bombs hidden and exploded in the factories that produced war materials, and industrial railroad lines damaged so that the goods couldn't be transported. And she knew what resistance meant. Papa had explained when she overheard the word and asked. The resistance fighters were Danish people, no one knew who because they were very secret, who were determined to bring harm to the Nazis however they could. They damaged the German trucks and cars and bombed their factories. They were very brave. Sometimes they were caught and killed. I must go and speak to Ellen, Miss Rosen said, moving towards the door. You girls work a different way to school tomorrow. Promise me, Anna-Marie, and Ellen will promise too. So Mrs. Rosen's plan is that they walk a different way to school tomorrow. We will, Miss Rosen, but what does it matter? There are German soldiers on every corner. They will remember your faces, Mrs. Rosen said, turning in the doorway to the hall. It is important to be one of the crowd always. Be one of many. Be sure that they never have reason to remember your face. She disappeared into the hall and closed the door behind her. He'll remember my face, Mama, Kirsty announced happily, because he said I look like his little girl. He said I was pretty. If he had such a pretty little girl, why doesn't he go back to her like a good father? Mrs. Johansson murmured, stroking Kirsty's cheek. Why doesn't he go back to his own country? Mama, is there anything to eat? Anna-Marie asked, hoping to take her mother's mind away from the soldiers. Take some bread and give a piece to your sister. With butter? Kirsty asked hopefully. No butter, her mother replied. You know that. Kirsty sighed as Anna-Marie went to the bread box in the kitchen. I wish I could have a cupcake, she said. A big yellow cupcake with pink frosting. Her mother laughed. For a little girl, you have a long memory, she told Kirsty. There hasn't been any butter or sugar for cupcakes for a long time, a year at least. Remember, because of the war, the food supplies were very low. When will there be cupcakes again? When the war ends, Miss Johansson said. She glanced through the window down to the street corner where the soldiers stood, their faces impassive beneath the metal helmets. When the soldiers leave. Did you find these answers? Can you explain why the girls were afraid of the soldiers? Was it maybe because they were German and they were Nazis and they were invading their country? Number 2, why isn't Kirsty afraid of the soldiers? Kirsty's only 5 years old. She's still a child. She doesn't realize the seriousness of the situation. And the Germans came when she was about 2 years old. And when you're 2, you don't know things, right? So for 3 years of her life, these Germans were around her. So to her, that's just life. Like, la-di-la, they're always there, so what's different now? She doesn't understand at all. And then question number 3, what advice did Miss Rosen give the girls about behaving outside? She said that they must take a different route to school so that the Germans cannot recognize their faces anymore. And then question number 4, why do you think the Free Danes newspaper was important to Denmark during the war years? Well, I don't know. Why do you think? Let me know.